Hello, and this time we're looking at the index rules, which I'll just talk about generally, and then we'll have a look at these, just a couple of examples. So index rules are all about when you're multiplying or dividing or doing something else to a number or two numbers with the same base. So that means it's the same number, like 5 times 5. So these are the base numbers. And the index is the power here, so 5 squared times 5 to the 7, and how we can simplify that. Now, okay, these are numbers, so we could work out this is 25, and we could work out whatever that is, huge number, and we could times them together. But if we're simplifying, we can just say, okay, if you times these two 5s together, you then can say it's the same as adding the powers, okay? So this is going to be 5 to the power of 9. And this kind of makes sense because 5 squared is 5 times 5, and 5 to the 7 is 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. And if we're timesing them in between, well, that's just 9 5s all times together. Okay, so to write it in more formal speak, rather than with 5s, we can say a number to the power of m times the same number to the power of n is that number to the power of m plus n. A number to the power of m divided by a number to the power of n, which is the same as writing a to the m over a to the n. That equals a to the m minus n. You subtract the powers if it's divide. And a to the m raised to another power of n. Okay, so if you raise something to a power and then raise it to another power, then you're going to get a to the mn. You multiply those powers together. Okay, so it doesn't matter if there's fractions or minus numbers or whatever it is, doesn't make a difference whatsoever. You still just follow these rules. So we're timesing the b's together, so we're going to add the powers. 4 add minus 2 is going to give b squared. Yeah, 4 add minus 2 is just 2. Dividing means we subtract, so it's going to be c to the power of minus 1, take away, because of the divide, take away 2, so to the power of minus 3. Raised to a power to another power, we times them together. Minus 1 times 2 is minus 2. And finally, I think this is supposed to be a mixed number, which I really don't think that's good. I personally would have that as top heavy, but never mind. 2.5, a to the 2.5 times a to the minus a half, we're going to add them together, and that's going to give us a to the power of 2, because a half take a half gives us, goes away and just leaves us the 2. Now, just a quick word of warning, when there's numbers flying around, please be careful not to process the numbers in the wrong way. So let's change this to be 2b to the 4 times 3b to the minus 2. We're going to process the powers in the same way. Okay, so b to the 4 times b to the minus 2, we add the powers together, so that's still b squared. But then a lot of people try and do the same thing to the 3 and the 2. These aren't powers. This is only for indices, so powers, index rules. The 2 and the 3, it's just saying 2 times 3, which is 6. So don't add those together. That's still 2 times 3. Likewise, if you've got the raised to a power thing, if it's 2g to the minus 1 and then all squared, including that 2, if that 2 is in the bracket, it is being squared. So we're not going to, this is a bad example because, let's put a 5 in. Okay, so some people say, okay, well, correctly, g to the minus 1 and then to the power of 2, times it together, get minus 2, and then they do 5 times 2. But again, no, we're only timesing the powers together. This isn't a power, that's just the number 5, and 5 squared is a thing. 5 squared is 25. So don't get confused between the index rule, how you process, we haven't processed what this number actually to the minus 1 and then squared is. All we've said is some number, if we do 2 powers together, how can we simplify the powers? Okay, if they were times together, we can simplify the powers by adding, subtracting if it was divide, or timesing if it was power then power. Other things like numbers just get treated as normal. If it's in the bracket, it's not being affected by the minus 1, that's only on the g, but it's in a bracket with a power of 2, so it is squared. And when they're times, they are times together. So just watch out for that. Try not to make any silly mistakes with the coefficients of questions like this. Okay, now I could go through hundreds of different examples. You can have ones where it's sort of like a to the 5 times a to the 3 divided by a squared. Obviously you're going to add these together because it's times, and then take away the power of 2. So 5, 3 is 8, take 2, it's going to be a to the 6. So there's all lots of different combinations they can do to try and confuse you. But as I say, it doesn't matter if you've got negative powers or fractions, it doesn't matter what they are. If it's timesing, you add them together. And if you're not sure how to do that because it's got fractions in it, then just do it on a calculator. If it's divide, you take them away, and if it's raised to a power and then another power, then you times it. Last thing, this is not the same as g to the minus 1 to the 2. Okay, so if you see something like this where it's got something to a power without a bracket, that is different to having it in a bracket. This doesn't come up in GCSE, it's always in a bracket, but you've got to be careful not to write it either. What does this mean? Okay, well this means when we have it without the bracket, we do the top power first rather than the lower power. So you can't just times them together this time. We're going to say, okay, this is minus 1 squared, which is positive 1, and then that's g to the power of positive 1. G to the 1 is a very different answer to g to the minus 2. Okay, so just be careful. If it's no brackets, then you do the top power. So if it was like a to the power of 1 to the power of 2 to the power of 3 to the power of 4, you would do 3 to the power of 4, and then 2 to the power of that number, and then 1 to the power of that number, and then a to the power of all of that. It's only if it's got brackets that you can do this thing where you times it. So if it was a to the 1, then squared, then cubed, then to the 4, then this is going to be a to the power of 1 times 2 times 3 times 4, which is a much smaller number than doing each power working down. So just be careful with using brackets. If you're writing things out, make sure you put in the brackets if you need to. Okay, any questions, pop them in the comments down below, but otherwise, cheerio.